Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. Chapter 9. A grand debate at the General Assembly of Houyhnhnms, and how it was determined. The learning of the Houyhnhnms, their buildings, their manner of burials, the defectiveness of their language. One of these grand assemblies was held in my time, about 3 months from my departure, whither my master went as representative of our district. In this council was resumed to their old debate, and indeed the only debate which ever happened in that country, whereof my master, after his return, gave me a very particular account. The question was to be debated was whether the Yahoos should be exterminated from the face of the earth. One of the members for the affirmative offered several arguments of great strength and weight, alleging that as the Yahoos were the most filthiest and noisome and deformed animal which nature has ever produced, so they were most restive and indocible, mischievous and malicious. They would privately suck the teats of Houyhnhnms cows, and kill and devour their cats, trample down their oats and grass, if they were not continually watched, and commit 1,000 other extravagancies. He took notice of a general tradition, that Yahoos have not always been in that country, but that many ages ago, 2 or 3 of these brutes appeared upon a mountain, where they produced by heat of sun, upon corrupted mud and slime, or from the ooze or froth of the sea, was never known. That these Yahoos engendered, and their brood in a short time grew so numerous as to overrun and infest the whole nation. That the Houyhnhnms, to get rid of this evil, made a general hunting, that the last enclosed of the herd, destroying the elder. Every Houyhnhnm kept 2 young ones in a kennel, and brought them to such a degree of tameness as an animal so savage by nature can be capable of acquiring, using them for draught and carriage. That there seemed to be much truth in this tradition, that those creatures could not be Yimlashi or aberrations of the land, because of the violent hatred of Houyhnhnms, as well as all other animals, bore them, which although their evil disposition sufficiently deserved, could never have arrived at so high a degree if they had been evergreens, or else they would have been long since rooted out, that the inhabitants, taking a fancy used to the service of Yahoos, had very imprudently neglected to cultivate the breed of asses, which were comely of animal, easily kept, more tame and orderly, without any offensive smell, strong enough for labour, although they yield to the other in agility of body, which if their braying be no agreeable sound, it was far more preferable to the horrible howlings of Yahoos. Several others declared their sentiments to the same purpose, when my master proposed an expedient to the assembly whereof he had indeed borrowed the hint from me. He approved of the tradition, mentioned by the honourable member who spoke before, and affirmed that 2 Yahoos, said to be first seen among them, had driven thither over the sea, that coming to the land, and being forsaken by their companions, they retired to the mountains, and, degenerating by degrees, became in process of time much more savage than their own of their species in the country from whence these 2 originals came. The reason of this assertion was that he had now in his possession the reason of his assertions was that he had now in his possession a certain wonderful Yahoo, meaning myself, which was most of them had heard of, many of them had seen. He related them to them, how he first found me, that my body was all covered with an artificial composure of skins and hairs of other animals, that I had a language of my own, and I thoroughly learned theirs. I had related to him the accidents which brought me thither, and when he saw me without my covering, I was an exact Yahoo in every part, only a whiter colour, less hairy, and with shorter claws. He added how I endeavoured to persuade him that in my own other countries the Yahoos acted as governing rational animals, and held the Houyhnhnms in servitude. that he observed me in all qualities of a Yahoo, only a little more civilized by some tincture of reason, which, however, was in a degree far inferior of the Hunimnim race, as the Yahoos of their country were to me, that among other things, I mentioned a custom that we had castrating Hunimnims when they were young, in order to render them tame, that the operation was easy and safe, that there was no shame to learn wisdom from brutes, as industry had taught by the ant, in building by much the shallow. For I translate the word Lanahan, although it much be a much larger fowl, that this invention might be practised upon the younger Yahoos here, which besides rendering them tractable or fitter for use, would in an age put an end to the whole species without destroying life. That in the meantime the Hunimnims should be exhorted to cultivate the breeding of asses, as they are in all respects more valuable brutes, as they have this advantage to be fit for service at 5 years old, which the others are not till 12. This was all my master's thought fit to tell me that time of what passed to the Grand Council. But he was pleased to conceal one particular, which related personally to myself, whereof I soon felt the unhappy effect, as the reader will know in its proper place, from whence I date all the succeeding misfortunes of my life. The Hunimnims have no letters, and consequently their knowledge is all traditional. But there happening to be a few events at any moment among a people so well united, naturally disposed to every virtue, wholly governed by reason, and cut off from all commerce of other nations, the historical part is easily preserved without burthening of their memories. I had already observed that they are subject to no diseases, and therefore can have no need of a physician. However, they have excellent medicines composed of herbs to cure accidental bruises and cuts in the pastern of a frog of the foot by sharp stones, as well as other maims and hurts in several parts of the body. They calculate the year by the revolution of the sun and the moon, but use no subdivisions into weeks. They are well enough acquainted with the motions of those two luminaries, and understand the nature of eclipses, and this is the utmost progress of their astronomy. In poetry they must be allowed to excel all other mortals, wherein the justness of their similes and the minuteness, as well as the exactness of their descriptions, are indeed inimitable. Their verses abound very much in both of these, and usually contain some either exalted notions of friendship and benevolence, or praises of those who are victors in the race, or other bodily exercises. The buildings, although very rude and simple, are not inconvenient, but well contrived to defend themselves from all injuries of cold and heat. They have a kind of tree, which at 40 years old loosens in the root, and falls with the first storm. They grow very straight, being pointed like stakes with a sharp stone, for Hunimims know not the use of iron, which they stick them erect in the ground about 10 inches asunder, then weave in oat straw. Sometimes what Wolders but betwixt them. The roof is made after the same manner, and so are the doors. The Hunimnims use the hollow part between the pastern and the hoof of their forefeet, as we do our hands. This greater the dexterity that I could first imagine. I have seen a white mare of our family thread a needle, which I lent her on purpose, with that joint. They milk their cows, reap their oats, and do all the work which require hands in the same manner. They have the kind of hard flints, which, by grinding against other stones, they form into instruments, that serve instead of wedges, axes, and hammers. With tools made of these flints, they are likewise their hay, and reap their oats, which there groweth naturally in several fields. The Yahoos draw home sheaves in carriages, and servants tread them in certain covered huts to get at the grain, which is kept in stores. They can meet, they make a rude kind of earthen and wooden vessel, and bake the former in the sun. If they can avoid casualties, they die only of old age, and are buried in the obscurest places that can be found. Their friends and relations express neither joy nor grief at their departure, nor does the dying person discover the least regret that he is leaving the world, any more if he were upon returning home from a visit to one of his neighbors. I remember my master once made an appointment with a friend and a family to come visit his house upon some affair of importance. On the day fixed, the mistress and her two children came very late. She made two excuses. First for her husband, who, as she said, happened that very morning to Shanwash. The word is strongly expressive in their language, but not easily rendered in the English. It signifies to retire from his first mother. Her excuse for not coming sooner was that her husband dying late in the morning. She was a good while consulting her servants about the convenient place where his body should be laid, and I observed she behaved herself at our house as cheerfully as the rest, and died about 3 months later. They live generally to 70 or 75 years, very seldom to fourscore. Some weeks before their death they feel gradually decay, but without pain. During this time they are much visited by their friends, but they cannot go abroad with their usual ease and satisfaction. However, about 10 days before their death, which they seldom fail in computing, they return the visits they have made to them by those who are nearest in the neighbourhood, being carried in a convenient sledge drawn by Yahoos, which vehicle they use, not only upon this occasion, but when they grow old upon long journeys, or when they are lame by accident, and therefore when the dying Houyhnhnms return those visits, they take a solemn leave of their friends, as if they were going to some remote part of the country, where they design to pass the rest of their lives. I know not whether it may be worth observing that the Houyhnhnms, having no words in their language to express anything that is evil, except that they borrow from the deformities or ill qualities of Yahoos. Thus they denote the folly of a servant, the omissions of a child, a stone that cuts our feet, a continuance of unseasonable weather, and the like, by adding to each of the epithets of Yahoos. For instance, Hidden Yahoo, or Walma Yahoo, or Lama Yahoo, and the ill-contrived house, Yadnahu Hemlob Yahoo. I could with great pleasure enlarge farther upon the manners and virtues of this excellent people, but intending in a short time to publish a volume by itself expressly that upon a subject, I refer the reader thither, and in the meantime proceed to relate my own sad catastrophe.